It's not really about, I think, the degree of transformation, but the appropriateness of what you use. And you're being cast for your qualities, so somebody wants some of you. So if you're too obsessed with change, you may be
Yeah.
missing the gold you have for free. So if you're playing a character who is absolutely has your personal background, and a whole range of conditions that you've experienced yourself, then you just have to sort of take all the given circumstances and your sort of magic ifs together and play it pretty much as you would do it. But if you're playing a Victorian English woman, then you've got to go, what if I was born in this country? What if I was born then? What if I had that class background? How would that affect me? And on a psychological level, gradually you're just going closer and closer to the world of the play, and anything that belongs to you that is in the way of that, you're going to ditch. Hugh Grant in Paddington, which he regards as his greatest performance, which is it's a children's story about an animated bear, but he does give a great character performance because he plays a character who transforms and plays all these different characters. So he uses all this theatrical technique, and usually he's only asked to use a certain set of faculties. They either turn him into a nice version of that sort of bumbling Englishman or a slightly sort of sinister, creepy version of him, and it depends what he's selecting or deselecting. But that's all transformation. So that goes back to the Michael Chekhov stuff we were talking about the lists. I have an optimism level of 10, but my
Yeah.
character has an optimism level of 5, so I'm going to have to then work out how I would be if I was less optimistic. By changing how you would be if you were less optimistic, you've got undergone a character change. Let's say you're walking down the road and you're playing an older woman or something, and you see this woman, she's limping along the road, and she's got this certain way of walking, and on some sort of instinctive level, you go, "That's her." Now, if you copy the external stuff of that, you've only got the shell of it. There's something in the struggle of that woman's walk that reflects something of the upbringing of the character or the history of the character that I'm looking at. Now, if you look at her limp closely, she's holding everything in here. She couldn't really say anything. And then you realize that she's had a lot of physical hardship and she's pushing against it to get her shopping done, and she's doing it without any help. And she's never had any help. And she's always had to look after herself. And at that point, you realize how she feels. You don't look at it from the mind, don't look at it as a series of categories. Look from the heart a little bit. Feel the pain of the person or the joy of the person you're copying. Where is that character's grief in her body? Where is her love? Where is her positivity? Where is her negativity? Where is her fear? Is it the way she rubs her hand every now and again when people look at it in a certain way? Or those kind of things. And then you're sort of entering that territory of psychological gesture and those things. Sort of work out in your mind what her voice is like, and imagine her partner, or her daughter or her sister or whatever it is you feel that she might have, and how would she talk. It doesn't have to be at all real. You're just sort of playing with it. John Cleese wrote this book about creativity, and I thought it's this really interesting thing that he put his finger on. About you have periods of openness and periods of closedness. So, an uncreative business or an uncreative process is when we're closed, and we're closed by sometimes even by ambition, by trying to get it right without having the openness to play. Sometimes we're closed down by pressure or tension, or sometimes by the environment that we're working in. It doesn't feel like a creative atmosphere. And a creative atmosphere is one with a lot of openness. So you have to just sort of let things happen without any direction. Can you just play with it without a result? And then there's a certain period where that time finishes and you go, what have I got? And it will be a lot of messy, instinctive stuff. And then you start to kind of close it down again. Then you have to play with what you've closed down, and you kind of go back to it and you open it up. So there's an openness and a closeness. And when you're looking at the woman in the street, there's an openness of letting your instinct come in. Just go, I don't know why, but that's the way she walks.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be asking why at that point, because
Yeah.
it'll get in your way and you will be trying to change life into to suit your work. You just go with it and you go, I'll just walk in her shoes for a bit and I'll feel it and I'll find that limp and I'll do that. And if you're keeping the playful stuff going and you're looking from the heart, you go, why is her sadness? Now, you don't have to be right, because as you're looking at her, you're always going to be looking through the lens of your character. So you're really asking, where is my character's sadness that I found in her? You're not actually trying to either totally reproduce what you see in her, and you're not trying to reproduce totally what you get from the text. You're just going, how does the text make me feel about her? But that's even too conscious. You're going, why is she right? There's something that's a struggle. That the way she holds a stick, that's how she feels about her son. Don't know why. I'll hold a stick like that and I'll see what it is. And then you start to feel it. And there's absolutely no value to anything that you do visually unless it tells you something about the soul of the character, about the struggles of the character and the history of the character and their wants. And it won't tell you that intellectually, it will only tell you that through feelings in the body. So you don't have to nail it down as a set of intellectual categories. You just know that she's protecting something here. And then you go back to the given circumstances and you might find that there's something that you can justify it with from the text.
So what you're saying is, if I'm seeing the woman on the street, you're saying I'm not thinking I'm just going to try to emulate how I think she feels, and I'm not just going to go to the text and be like, well, this is how I think. It's more like, how does the text made me feel about her?
You'll have more understanding of the text at that point than you will of her. You know, you've done your homework, which you will have, so you'll know what's going on with your character, and you're looking at this point for clues in things you see. And you notice that she walks in a certain way, and you know that there's a certain set of struggles in your character, and they feel the same. So you walk in the way that the character walks, the person you see, and you start to see what is of the text and what isn't. And then you'll see another person walk down the street on the other side of the road, and they will hold their head the way this woman does. So this person will have her sense of pride. This one will have her suffering. So the person who's walking like that, she's struggling against the wind. The one that's really proud is like this. But you notice, like, I hold my pride here, but there's also the struggle.
Yeah.
And then you'll notice something will open or close in you. That's where the difference comes. Because when you're taking on her pride or her struggle, your pride or struggle will kind of clash with it. And you'll kind of notice it's not the same. Or actually, it's a bit like mine on that level. But for me, I probably, if I feel it, hold it here, and maybe she holds it there, or whatever. You're feeling your way in. You're feeling your way in. It might even not be the woman across the road. It might just be an image in your mind, like you said. You see the picture of the character and you take it on. And you say, no, here's her at the end of a series of windy roads. And here's me at the end of a series of windy roads. And I took path A and she took path B. And I took path C and she took path D. We both took path E for a while, but I went this way, but she carried on along it. And this is where you're thinking about the magic E. If you're saying, well, what if I'd stayed down that route? You know, what if I'd been like those people? What if I had, instead of ambition, despair? Or what if instead of this person in my life, I had that person in my life? What if I did that? And then you'll gradually take yourself to her. You know, that'd be finding the root of the character that you share, something that then can be an inspiration for you to build on. And the rest of the stuff you cut away, you go deeper into that territory. Because again, you're in training, you want to try everything out. And then you'll go, oh, they just want me to be like me, but I work in a cafe, fine. Actually, it'd be so easy, comparatively.
Wait.
Or maybe it won't, because maybe you won't celebrate the things of yourself. So, I mean, there's another quality of transformation. It's not just that you're using yourself, it's that you have attitudes to yourself. Well, we all do. We have attitudes to ourselves. This is a problematic thing, because the thing that you think you are may not be the thing you appear to be. Now, if people are seeing a label and they want you to do some certain kind of thing, and you're not seeing the label, you won't please them. But if you do please them too much, you just become a stereotype, you know. There are many female characters that are just ciphers, you know. They're people to kind of sleep with, dump, get married
Yeah.
to, not be married to suddenly, all that sort of stuff for the male character. So particularly in movies, it's changing, but it's there. So in that case, if you're playing that, you want to bring as much richness to it as possible, because actually you haven't got much else going. So I think, it's asking questions of, to investigate what is most ugly about yourself and be bringing that forward. And I don't mean sort of the way you look. It's about those kind of the ugly habits. It's the sort of little mean thoughts that we have that we hide from other people, or the kind of the negative things we do. Those kind of things get lost in the whole process sometimes, because people are still on one level trying to present themselves in a way that's positive. And actually what we want to see is honesty. But there's a problem here with searching for truth, because it's almost like we're looking for truth outside of ourselves to be really purely truthful, rather than notice that all those little despicable things about ourselves that we hide, well, they're really useful, because you take them down the paths that we were talking about, and then you can go much further into all those things. You might have the thought, but you might not necessarily say the words. You might say the words, but you might not necessarily do the deed. But you're playing the person who does the deed. So you might go, okay, well, if they think that, I can trace that back to some little dark pattern in myself that I probably worked to eradicate, but actually it's really useful. Art of it is to align your soul to the characters. So there's this thing that's been going, this meme of Russell Crowe going around recently saying, well, I didn't go to drama school or anything like that. I'd do the Russell Crowe method. I don't even know what a fucking Stanislavski method is. Fuck that. Some people, wonderful, Russell Crowe, and what a dick. But he's just honest, because he was working from an early age. He's actually had a few characters where he has had to get into character. The one thing he said in all that was, you just sort of find your own way to get close to the character, So basically he's doing it all. He's doing all the things that you do, Your test is your partner. If they believe you, you've done it.
Yes.
And that's another thing. You just look at, Meryl Streep. Everyone around her believes her, and they give their A game, because she absolutely takes them into the world. So you have to have total belief in that character, but also you have to be quite tough and say, I'm not believing you there. So either I'm missing something, or you're missing something, or we're on a different wavelength, so we need to discuss what that is.
And feeling.
Everything you have to feel. So you have to say, what if? That's it. And that's the way, and you have to say, what if? And you can, it doesn't have to be so technical. It can be just opening up, and you just imagine yourself into that body and that feeling,
Yeah. Okay.
Go to the shop in character and see what the difference is in the way that people treat you. This is a massive thing, actually. And we did it was like a Mike Leigh thing. So people were it was a devised thing. People were developing their characters on people that they'd known, and were turning them into new characters through improvisations. And one of the actors, she said, "Oh, she's so confident, and she's sort of so flirty, and I feel really sort of self-conscious, and I never liked that." And she said, "I really want to try and play that kind of outgoing, sort of sexually confident character, but I don't really want it." So she's just listing all the characteristics of this person she knew, and the kind of clothes that she wore, which she wouldn't wear, like heels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she just went to the shop, and she said, "My God, I had 30 men," like just one after another, kind of looking at her or commenting or something that she doesn't experience normally at all. And of course, she's playing a character who is looking for male attention, so so the character she's playing has really learnt a set of skills to get that, whether that's positive or negative, but that's what she's done. So she's taking on all that stuff with absolutely no kind of psychological preparation for the onslaught of attention she's going to get. And it was very interesting, because then she realised how vulnerable the character that she was playing was, how she felt she needed to have that attention, but also be managing it all the time. And was also scared of being overlooked. So there must have been some reason for that. I think it's a very, very useful exercise. Body and the same, all that sort of stuff. The way you hold yourself just completely changes the way people treat you, or where you're asking to be looked at, or what permission you're giving in the space. And then you notice actually how uncomfortable people might be with that and how much of a test it is. It's a sort of shit test for everyone who comes your way, you know? And that's very interesting because you're looking at your status and you're looking at what effect you have. So I mean, I think that's really useful, and I think if you're going to get into the character, you have to get comfortable with it. It's largely giving yourself permission to be there, to be seen without feeling any demands are made on you, and to have the power. You know.
Yes.
So you go
Yes.
through the whole thing and you look at everything they say and do, and you think their problem is they're too nosy. Their problem is they're too servile. Their problem is they're always trying to seduce me. Their problem is whatever it happens to be. Is to come back to the relationship. Why could it be important that that is said and that exists between those two characters in terms of their relationship? So when you start to ask what the relationship is, what the importance of the relationship is, you might make a specific choice. The thing that's going to ramp up the relationship, make everyone else's life more difficult, is the most interesting generally. If people aren't interested in the relationship, they won't be interested in what your character's doing unless it actually has some kind of interplay with the relationship. If you just play the relationship, then you're playing the story, but you're not necessarily playing the sophistication of the character. And I think in female characters, that's a real challenge of the value of the relationship. And maybe you say, well, what do I want? What does the writer want? And those are two different questions for the same, because you go, sometimes you want to be an open book and you want to see exactly what they're thinking, but sometimes you don't want to know what people are thinking. You want to think that it could be both ways, you know. If you don't know how to answer a question asked you of another actor, then you've got to ask them to keep asking the question in different ways until it makes sense to you. And you've got to have that relation, because they have to provoke you. Like, it's an element of Meisner that's really vital, and you shouldn't be lost. You know, the repetition thing, or you're involved in a task and someone's interrupting it and you want something and they get in your face. So I think when you have those problems, the way you're doing it at the moment is turning on yourself, and you're going, I don't know why, I don't know what that means, what I'm doing. In fact, what all you need to really do is say, why do you say that? You know, and then you'll know something about the relationship, and then you'll know why maybe you play the way you do to them. It might have nothing to do with sort of facts of the case. It might totally to do with the way the question is asked.
Right. Yes, I see what you're saying.
So, you know, another thing to do always, I think, is to come back and go, what is the problem with everyone else? What do they need? How do they get in my face? And how do I get space? And how do I get what I want from them? I'm seeing. The other issue is the relationship might not be as important as the character's development, and that might be the focus. But there's a really good little exercise that I kind of worked out a few years ago, where you just you swap roles, and you play the same scene as you want the other person to play it. So it's not acted well, you know, because you're only playing the surface. But it particularly works with male-female kind of dynamics. Because you go, right, I'm going to play the character with all the irritating tones of voice that a man could have in that situation, and you're going to hear it, the things that would really press my buttons. And you're going to play it with all the annoying habits that a woman might have and reactions in that scene. And then you kind of swap it over, and then you hear these tones of voice and you try them, because people identify things that work on you. So I know, for example, there are millions of ways of patronizing somebody, but there are kinds of ways that would really press your buttons. Play the scene, swap over a little bit, and sort of play it the way that, in a very over the top way, the way you would want it to be played to you, to provoke you, and you can really give each other some good clues. If they want to annoy you with it, if that's their intention, it's going to be good for them as a character to have noticed the best way to do that. But I think sometimes just having a talk initially and just say, look, I like to work this way, and it kind of helps me if we can just tell each other. You know, and then you work out where you're at, and sometimes people can be just, you know, whatever. But that's up to them. In that case, you can be annoyed you can be annoyed about them.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever works, you know. Sometimes that gets you out of a lot of trouble because you just play the play and you realise that there's nothing else for you to do apart from play the play, and you're busy struggling over something that is, you're just here to kind of get the plot moving along in that scene. So absolutely have an opinion about the data, get the data across, and the audience will be watching if it's a key moment. Meryl Streep does this so well. Somebody thinks she's so invested in the reality of the moment of the scene, and she absolutely is, but she will look at what the scene means as well, and sometimes she'll play that. Like there's a film about, and she's taken over her husband's newspaper and she's being treated with all this kind of disrespect, and she's sitting around this table and she's prepared what she's going to say, and she just sort of talks like this really quietly, and you haven't heard her speak like that, and you know from the moment that she's just telling you that these men won't listen, and they never have, and she doesn't feel like able to speak to them, but she's really just ramping up something in the story that is sort of hinted at, it's there, but she's really pushing it, this theme, so that's where you can get really clever, but you sort of have to know everything first, and then you go, I'm going to play the story, I'm going to play the ideas. She's also playing the relationship and the story. Yeah. So it's all happening at the same time. She's made the theme the relationship. There's a sort of fascination with not knowing what people are thinking, and that's really interesting. You have to commit to keeping that doubt in the mind of the audience. You can make a specific decision, but the audience have to keep doubting. And they can't doubt because you're completely, it's completely inconsistent, but they can doubt because you make choices. One way of making the audience doubt or to look at the depth of the character is to play different ways in different scenes. One of the things that it was saying is that we construct our view of other people through what they do. So the text as it goes on will change the audience's view of you. You just have to know what the potential is for the different things. So you say, she has a potential for having someone murdered, right? So that's something that has to be in the character, the potential that's triggered. She might have the potential for being very kind or something else as well. And so then that potential has to be within the character. And then when those things come up, you just play them totally, and then the audience think, gosh, she was this, she was this, she was this. You're not actually layering it, you're not trying to play two things at once. As we can be all sorts of different things at different times. Isolate the key moments in the play. And this is, again, I think very useful for Jacobean stuff, that you're playing the play too. It is a formulaic thing. You're playing the play. What kind of imagery does she use? That's how she thinks. Pictures in her mind.
Yes.
Feel your way into everything. Let it affect you. Let it happen, actually. Don't force it too much. You will, however long this takes you, you'll get to the point where you will have to just stop and go, trust the moment. So you're setting yourself up to be absolutely vulnerable with the terror of not knowing what's going on next at any given time. That's actually what you need. You may have planned it, but when you do it, you can't remember that. You have to think it's all going to go a different way, and embrace the moments where you fail as the character, because that's the most interesting stuff. The sense of, oh God, I'm failing, which is very difficult if you're trying to be a good actor while you're trying to play someone who's suffering.
Because it would be
because you're trying to be good as an actor, you're trying to be on top of the scene, and the scene isn't going her way. You go into the room and you've bought flowers and this person you love, and you see them, and it's going to be great, and they've got this kind of illness in the background, but it's kind of gone, and then you suddenly see that they're kind of white as a sheet and they're lying there and it's really serious. You failed,
Yes.
but it's nothing to do with you. It's
right.
The story, and the story's put you in a sense where there's nothing you can do to make them feel better. So you have to sort of embrace that sense of failure. But if we're trying to play the scene as an actor, we might be like, oh, then I would be very upset, and then I would be like this, and then I would do that. So no, just try and make it better. And the more you try and make it better, and the more you feel lost, hopeless, and like you don't even know how to act next.
Yes.
Because that's what happens when bad stuff happens. We don't know what the hell to do. You think that transformation is putting on another skin, and it's not. It's taking off a layer.
Oh, yes,
Do,
yes, that's exactly it.
do you see what I mean? It's not you're adding something. It's like it may be that what you're taking off is the layer of skin between you and the limp that you've picked up for this person. You're not adding it. It's just underneath somehow. You sort of drop back into the character, and a new body sort of forms, because otherwise what you're doing is you're you, and then you're putting the stuff on top, and it's too much. You actually have to get rid of stuff to let other stuff in. It's clearing.
Yes,
It's a clearing away.
yes,
That that's really the way body center works. You don't add, if you're going to say, okay, I've got a blue ball in my chest and that's my body center. You don't add that to your existing body. You go, that's there, and you take everything out that's you, and you sort of sit back in that sort of blue ball, and you let that be there. From it.
yes,
But you have to just sort of let yourself get out of the way, and that's the playing moment. That's the playing stuff. Just let yourself fail with it a little bit, and trust that instinct. It's becoming
yes,
absorbed in the feeling.